Are you ready to do this? Big Uncle Sal, you ready to do this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Okay, let me set up the scene. Okay, so now in the previous episode, we delved into one of Morpheus's quotes when he said, businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we're trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. So that
Yeah.
was the last episode, right?
Mm.
Now, at this point, when he said that, Morpheus and Neo were walking through this crowd of people in
Hmm.
in a metropolitan sort of business district in the city. This is Matrix One, shortly before we see the woman in red. Okay. Now that quote actually continues. So we divided the quote in two because there was just so much to extract from it. So we've divided into two. But essentially, Morpheus goes on to say, you have to understand most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. So that's the quote me and Sal are going to be dissecting today. First of all, how are you, Sal? Big Uncle Sal, how's things going?
Oh, I'm doing great. Everything is well. God is good. Everything is good. I'm still here, and it's an honor and privilege to join with my brother Alexander.
Good, good. No, the honor's mine, mate. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll start, and then you go next, and then we'll meet at the end together. Is that okay?
Sure.
Very good. Okay. So, with regards to the quote, so first of all, what does it mean to be plugged into the matrix? So, Morpheus says that most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. So, what does it mean to be plugged into the matrix? So, basically, we learn for the Matrix One that the machines that run the matrix they used to be dependent on solar power. The skies were blackened for whatever reason, and now they're using humans as power sources. Basically, they're using humans as batteries. And do you remember Morpheus actually holds up a battery to Neo to illustrate this?
Yes.
Yeah. And he also uses the word slave. So essentially, if you're plugged into the matrix as a blue pill, you are a slave, you are a battery that's used to power this matrix machinery system. So the question is, if you are a slave, why would you fight to protect that situation? So Morpheus says they will fight to protect it. So if you're a slave, right, why would you fight to protect that status quo? And so what I want to do is go through three scenarios, Sal. So first of all, he uses the word inured. So I want to discuss that. And
Mm-hmm.
secondly, I want to discuss identification. And thirdly, I want to discuss resistance. So these titles are not going to mean anything right now, but I'll take them point by point. Is that okay?
Sure.
Good, good. Okay, so he uses this word inured. I actually, I had never really used this word. I didn't really even know what it meant before this actual quote when he says, and many of them are so inured. So looked
Mm-hmm.
up the dictionary. Basically, to inure someone is to accustom that person to something, especially something unpleasant. And they've given an example. These children have been inured to violence. So it's almost as if you become used to something unpleasant, is essentially what that is.
Yes.
And I suppose, and with relation to this quote, I think a lot of the time you can become accustomed or inured to something that's bad for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone comes and tries to take that thing away from you, even though it's bad, that can take you or threaten to take you out of your comfort zone, due to
Mm-hmm.
that change and sort of that disruption. You might feel the need to resist that disruption. So that's one possible reason why you would fight to stay in the matrix. But the second point, and this is probably the major reason I want to get across, Sal, is the issue of identification, right? So when you're in the matrix, you are essentially identifying with a virtual self image of yourself. It's not real. It's code. The matrix made it. But you not knowing any better, you identify with this virtual like avatar. You know what I mean by that? And you consider it yourself, and if you are identifying with this virtual avatar, this code, if you're identifying with that, if someone comes to you and tries to take that away from you, it's as if they're trying to take a limb from you, or they're trying to take something from your actual body, you know,
Yeah.
even though it's not actually you, you've identified with it, so it might as well be you. And I want to give sort of like an example to illustrate this. Let's say we go back a long time ago when we were babies. So baby Sal and baby Alexander, right? So we're babies in kindergarten or preschool, whatever you call it. And we're both, this preschool has toys. You're playing with a toy. I'm playing with a toy, right?
Yeah.
And the caregiver, the teacher, whoever comes and takes your toy away from you. So you start to cry, and I see this, but I'm not crying because I've still got my toy, right? So I'm
Yes.
playing away, I'm happy. Now the teacher gives you back your toy, you're happy now, you stop crying. And then the teacher comes and takes my toy away from me, and I start crying. Now, even and you're seeing all this, and even though it's happened to you, you don't cry. I'm crying because my toy's been taken out, but you don't cry. You're happy enough playing with your toy, even though you've seen it. So the question is, why did you cry when your toy was taken, but not when my toy was taken, and vice versa?
Mm.
And the point I'm getting across from this example is, even as a child, you can identify with an object. You know the object isn't a part of you. It's not part of your flesh. You know this, but subconsciously, it's as if you're treating that object as a limb. It's as if that object was like a third arm attached to your body. And
Mm.
so, someone comes and tries to take a part of you, the natural survival instinct or reaction
Mm-hmm.
is going to resist that. So, for example, in this example, you would have identified with your toy, but not mine. So, whenever that teacher came to take your toy away from you, it's as if that person was taking part of your actual body away from you. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So I think if you bring that into, if you bring that back into the matrix, if you're blue pilled, if you're plugged into the matrix, you're identifying with this virtual image of yourself that's not really you. You're identifying with, you know, the money, the cars, whatever, people, anything that the matrix has basically programmed you to have. You're
Yes.
identifying with that. So if someone like Morpheus or Neo or Trinity comes and tries to take that away from you, it's as if they're taking away your identity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same in the real world. I mean, in the real world, if you identify with a race, a religion, a gender, where you're from, political views, whatever, you know, if someone threatens that, there can be a really bad reaction to that. And that's what we see day in and day out.
Mm-hmm.
That alone has probably been the cause of the suffering of a lot of people. Just that misidentification, I identify as this and you're not this. So now, I need to cause you suffering. So that's, that would be my second point, this sort of misidentification.
Yeah.
And that being the reason why, as Morpheus says, they will fight to protect it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first two scenarios I've described, the first one being inured. So it's sort of, you're fighting because they're taking you out of your comfort zone. The second is sort of misidentifying an external object as yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and these two you can, Morpheus would still classify these two as enemy, as we saw in the previous quote. There's, even though we have sympathy for, because we can understand why this is happening. Morpheus is still considering them enemy. But the third type of person is, do you remember Cypher in the first Matrix? Do you know who I'm talking
Yes.
about? Okay. So he's the third type of person. Now Cypher, in my opinion, represents a different type of enemy, because he's been taken out of the matrix. He knows what the score is. He knows that, essentially, if you're blue pilled, if you're plugged into the machine, you're a slave, you're a battery. He knows this, and he knows, he has the knowledge that if you identify with your virtual image, he knows that that's a misidentification. Yet, even though he knows all this, he still fights against them. He kills his own, teammates in the
Yeah.
first Matrix. So I think that that's a different type of enemy, person, because in the first two examples, it's not really coming from a bad place, although they're still the enemy. It's coming from a misunderstanding, whereas in Cypher's case, he's willingly, I think he actually says ignorance is bliss at one point when he's eating that big Matrix steak. Do you remember that scene?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if I had to summarize it, I said a lot there, but if I had to summarize it, I would say that, it's this misidentification with your virtual self.
Mm-hmm.
When that's threatened, you're going to fight to protect it. And it's the same in the real world. If you identify with something that's not really you, you may, and people do, fight and cause suffering in order to protect what they think is their identity. Those are my thoughts on this. There's just so much to extract from it. So, I want you to now give your 2 cents, and, take as long as you need, in your own words. And if there's any overlap, no problem. That's, we want to hear that.
Sure. So I will continue to pick up on where you left off with Cypher.
Mm-hmm.
Now, King Solomon has said that he who has increaseth knowledge also increaseth sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Cypher says, that I was better off not knowing the truth, because when my eyes saw the truth, it was a life that I was not ready to live. I was okay with my 9 to 5 job and having good food to eat, not caring who was behind the system, who was running the system, and what was the whole ordeal behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So for him, the truth was too much to handle. And he wanted to go back to that reality where, I guess, when people say when they become woke, that things just get depressing for them because they see the world in reality for what it is, including
Sure.
its systems and the way that things have been set up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically, there is some truth to it, but also it just shows you that people rather stay complicit. Because I mean, just look at when I've been here in the US for the
Mm-hmm.
last 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I speak for myself under free speech. I represent myself only, and I say that they know that their taxpayers are being used to hurt innocent people overseas.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like, as long as it doesn't affect me and my children, I have no concern with it. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
be a good slave, pay my taxes on time, pay everything on time, not concerning what my money is being used for, not knowing with the universal karma, you are also complicit in that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when that spiritual suffering comes back to you and your people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the quote says, that most of these people are not ready to be unplugged.
Mm-hmm.
I could go to a college or a university or a school, and if I say anything that the history books will not teach, then they will see me as an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And there and it has been set up that way, where the victors write the history to make certain people look favorable and not give any other people any credit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way the system is. Whether it's in a job system, you better go there and do your job on time and not question anything. And you better go and see these things and realize that I go outside and I see people, my brother, and they're fighting with each other about race, religion, politics, you name it, not knowing that these people at the top, behind the scenes, they're all friends with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And they do that to divide and conquer you, knowing that the average person can't run for office in America. You cannot run for Congress or Senate or presidents unless you have like millions and millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So that right there shows the people that there is an inequality system where they have their own politics, their own justice system, their own laws, their own education and elite class. And that's exactly what applies to the worker class, because here in the system, they just teach you to be an obedient worker, how to meet deadlines. They're preparing you for the work factory, where after you finish high school, you either go to college, go to work for 40 years. And if you survive till the age of 65, then, you can retire. for whatever life you might have left. That's right, because people are not ready to be unplugged. You could be in a school system which claims to be diverse, but they'll have one section of the school which is for the kids who are have favors and connections, and their parents are rich. They'll be kept in the same classrooms with the same teachers, while they keep the low income kids and the other kids in the other area. So they're preparing one for elite colleges, while the other ones they're preparing them for menial jobs in low level colleges. So I've seen that truth with my own eyes, and if you speak out against it, they're just so hopelessly dependent on it that they're not going to see anything. I mean, look at the situation right now with the way things are going on. Everyone just stays quiet and says, yo, just worry about yourself. Because if I speak out against anything, I might be at favor of losing connections, jobs, or different titles that I might have. In all countries, organizations, religions, people who are connected or dependent on the system for their income or some kind of a favor, if they see any atrocity happening in front of them, they're going to have two pictures that flash in front of their mind. Should I rather keep my favors, money, and connection, or should I throw all of that away just to be a self-righteous person? Which is, I've spoken out against a lot of injustice here, and I can assure you, those who stand on the side of justice, even when you lose everything at the time of making any decision, God and the divine powers of the universe, however you perceive it, they take note of that, and they give you back whatever you lost times 10. Like when God asked King Solomon, what do you desire? He could have said riches, women, money, but he said, God, I only want wisdom. And God loved his answer, and in return gave him everything else also on top of wisdom.
Sure.
So when you stand up for what's right, you get everything. And that's the reality, my brother, that most of these people, I go out, they're too busy fighting about white, black, Democrat, Republican, this, that, or, this color, or playing crayon games or political games. I go to Pakistan, it's the same thing. People are fighting about whose politics is right, while you're not addressing the poverty and the injustices in your country. And they just want to have like the system where they just want to belong to something and feel a purpose and not address something. You have this country, and they said, oh, as long as it's not affecting me, I don't care what they do with my tax money, not knowing that spiritually you're also complicit as well. And when innocent people get hurt with, with your money being used. So Morpheus does have a point that these people, they are not ready. You could tell them the truth. They said, man, don't get me involved. They get scared right away. What if I lose my house? What if I lose my income?
The funny thing about that is, and sorry for interrupting you, but you see the people you're describing that are afraid to lose everything. Let's use the Matrix as an example.
Yeah.
Now, the people plugged in to the Matrix, everything they have, including their money, who they're with, the cars they have, the resources they have, everything has already been determined by the Matrix code itself. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So I think that the mistake is that, they feel that they are in control of their resources in the first place, and so there's that fear of losing it, whereas it was never yours to, control, but yes, continue.
Yeah. So in addition to what you said, which is beautiful, I might add, and to add on to that is, so it tells you that this world is a game. Everything is a game. And Imam Ali.
Wow, that's unreal.
Imam Ali also says that those who sell out this life for the next lose both of them. So the people in this life who sell out for fame and fortune in these different industries, and you see that even people with money, they're not happy in their relationships, they're suffering. And when they die, they're going to leave this fake reality behind. And on the other side, that's when you pay the price. And that's what, the Islamic theory supports as well, that the life of this world is nothing but a game and a deception. Those who fall astray to it, they are dependent, and it's hopeless to save them. I mean, you can't save all of them. It's like with the story of even Prophet Nuh, peace be upon him, who's known as Noah.
Yeah.
When he was crying out, telling people to come on his boat, his own son disbelieved him. And when the time came, and it was too late.
And in that story, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in that story, now this is from the Quran, right?
Yeah.
The one you're quoting. I mean, it's obviously in the Bible too, and the Old Testament. Yeah. I think in the Quran, God actually tells Noah that his son is not part of his family.
Yeah, yeah.
And that takes us back to the previous episode where, if you're part of the system, you are the enemy. It doesn't matter if you're a nun, if you're a charity worker, or even if it's a family member, if that person unfortunately is part of the system, that person, even if it's your family, can
Mm.
be the enemy. Because I think, because that person could go and harm some other person that's not in your family, a child, some innocent child, or man or woman. So even a family member, even one of your own family, if they are part of this matrix system, they would still be part of the enemy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely right. And you have heard the story of Hassan Saba, the old man of the mountain, right?
No, but share that with us, please. Please do.
So Hassan Saba, the old man of the mountain, was the leader of the assassins.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. People don't know, but the assassins actually comes from an Arabic word, right? It comes from these people, Middle
Yeah,
East. Yeah.
it comes from the word asasiyun,
Mm.
which means the faithful.
Okay.
And it even shows you in the new John Wick movie that the aspect of the Hashashin still
Mm-hmm.
exists today.
Wow. Right. Right. Right.
And you see the truth in there. There's a story that I read about Hassan Saba that his own son
Mm-hmm.
had been corrupted beyond repair,
Mm-hmm.
and he had ordered the execution of his own son, saying
Wow.
that
Yeah.
if we don't have rules, then there's no
Mm-hmm.
difference between us and animals. Yeah,
It's
yeah, go on,
unfortunate
brother.
when that happens, but if you give your son, in that particular case, if you were to give your son favor and say, okay, he's my son, I'm going to look past it, he might go and harm a child of someone else's family, and
Yes.
that would be on you. It's a harsh situation, but you have to realize that, that person might go and harm someone else and really cause suffering to someone else. So, that person's the enemy, even if it's your son, your family, it doesn't matter. And in the Matrix, I mean, the Matrix is already determined who's your son, who's your mother. It might not be your actual blood relative. The Matrix has already said, okay, Salman, this is your mother, this is your daughter. So you can't
Hmm.
really give someone favor just because of family ties.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
suffer because of that. People die because of that.
Yeah, that's right. And it's like
Mm.
what a lot of our religions teach us too, that everything in your life was predetermined and it's
Mm.
already written that you were going to go through these events, no coincidences. You're going to meet the right people at the right time,
Yeah.
marry the right woman who was assigned to you, have this many kids with her,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll be you'll have a boy or a girl or etc.
Mm-hmm.
This is where you're going to end up with your life and peacefully pass away.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the life that this had said, that a lot of these occult traditions also say that when you come into this life and there's an aspect that everything is predetermined for you and
Mm-hmm.
you're just here to learn the lessons that you're here to learn, and your
Mm-hmm.
soul goes into another form of existence and so on and
Mm-hmm.
so on. So it's like a never ending cycle of energy
Mm-hmm.
that's being recycled over and
It's
over
so
again.
interesting. I mean, the Matrix is the reason we are doing, now, just for anyone listening, and the reason we're doing these episodes on the Matrix is because in the entire Hollywood, it's very rare to find a film that's entertaining and really well directed film, but it also has all these, all the, I don't know how the Wachowskis came up with all this stuff. I really don't. But it's rare to find a movie that has all these sort of subliminal lessons, beneath. It's very rare. But what you've just described, I can't remember which Matrix film it was, but I think the Oracle is telling you, you've already made all the decisions. It's just need to understand why you made them. I can't remember the exact quote. Maybe we can do that in another episode. But tell me this. I mean, what do you think makes a person? So Morpheus says you have to understand most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. What is it that makes someone not ready, and what is it that makes someone ready?
Well, the aspect of somebody that's not ready is people who are, let's say they have titles, degrees, positions of power, and when they see an injustice taking place in front of them, whether they're in organizations, they'd rather be silent and look the other way,
Mm-hmm.
because saying anything might bring heat upon them and make them lose everything that they worked for. So they're thinking like, yo, man, just I'm not gonna worry about the other person. Let me just try to save my own skin and throw this other person under the bus. which is the mentality that I've seen. Not saying all Americans are like this, but that's the majority of the mentality that I've seen here in organizations and workplaces.
It's funny that you said majority, because that, I mean, that's, Morpheus says most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, as
Of course.
in the majority. So it's unfortunate that, and I include myself in this, because we're all part, we all grew up in this kind of situation. But, he says most people, and
Yeah.
you see that, Zion, it's only the minority of people that are, in Zion, as it were. And
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I mean, from my, just going through my from my own personal experience, when I look back at all the projects that I tried, business things and all that in the past, that just, and I put in effort, I put in a lot of work, and it
Yeah.
didn't work out. But looking back on it, I'm kind of happy that it didn't work out, because I now know that even if it did work and made lots of money, I wouldn't have had the proper tools to appreciate it. I wouldn't have been ready to properly utilize that. I probably would have misused it. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think, but you don't know at the time that you're just not ready. You don't have the tools. You're not ready for what you wanted at that point. You're not ready for success. You weren't ready for a successful business. Maybe if your business did succeed, it would have been the worst thing for you. And when I look back in my life, that's what I see that, and I think, I don't know what it takes for someone to become ready, but I think a good start is, if as long as you know that you potentially are not ready, as long as you know that you're not ready, I think that's a really good start. If you have that humility and know that, look, I might not be ready for this emotionally. I might, I think that humility is always a good start.
Yeah, of course. I mean, sometimes you have to admit, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even myself in my journey, I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm still learning. I'm still
Mm-hmm.
growing. I'm not perfect. We all make mistakes, but
Mm-hmm.
we have to admit when we're at fault and make sure we make the effort to improve. While we live in a society where everyone believes that they're right and others are wrong, and no one's willing to have humility and learn from each other and resolve conflicts and make peace with one another.
How do you
That's
think the Wachowskis came up with this film? I mean, I look, um, I mean, the Matrix series, it is a very unique film. I mean, when I first watched it, it was just entertainment, pure entertainment. But I feel like every time I watch it, you're just learning something new. I mean, how do you think the Wachowskis, the directors, that is, how do you think they came up with all this stuff?
well, the thing about Hollywood and
Mm-hmm.
the a lot of these industries is they show you the truth,
Mm-hmm.
and to respect universal free law, they'll tell that we showed humanity the truth, but if they fail to pick up on
Mm-hmm.
what we told them,
Mm-hmm.
then that's not on us. So basically, in their point of view, that lowers their karma. So
Right.
so that, and just basically a lot of these TV shows and movies and video
Mm-hmm.
games, these people are in the know and they know many things that they will put the title of fiction,
Mm-hmm.
so it's not really scrutinized by people, but they will show you all the truth in it, in video games, in books, in TV shows, movies. So that way they're kind of telling you the truth to lower
Mm-hmm.
their karma, but at the same time it's like you got to be able to pick up on it, like what is
Mm-hmm.
really the truth and what is really fiction.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting indeed. Well, I mean, I think we've covered a good amount there from just those three sentences.
Definitely.
Was it two sentences? I think it's two sentences. It's sort of two sentences there. But
Lady in Red.
you know what? We'll make that the next episode, because that deserves its own episode.
Oh,
You know.
let's do it right now. I have the energy to do it.
Okay, good. Yeah, let's do it, mate.
Let's
Let's
do it.
freaking do
Let's
it.
do it.
Let's do it. Oh man, the lady in red, mate. What? Man, I need to get.
Pull her up. We're gonna knock this out of the park.
Okay, so basically, shortly after this scene, shortly after Morpheus says this beautiful lady in red walks past, and now I'm just going from memory, correct me if I'm wrong. This beautiful lady in a red dress walks past Neo while Morpheus is trying to teach him,
Yeah.
and Neo gets distracted, right? He gets distracted. Then Morpheus doesn't rebuke him, but Morpheus calls him out on it,
Yeah.
and then asks him to turn around. And when he does, when Neo turns around, you've got one of the agents with a big sort of Desert Eagle, gun pointed right in his face.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's what we're building up to. These, both of these quotes from the last episode of this, we're building up to that, the lady in red scene. So look, I went first, earlier on in this episode. So, tell us about this lady in red, this beautiful lady in red. Tell us about that.
Yes. So the lady in red symbolizes many things, and
What
there's
a beautiful woman,
two
mate.
two sides of this story of the lady in red.
Mm.
As one is temptation,
Uh-huh.
where people fall astray to this system.
Mm.
And they'll have the aspect of when you connect with God, which basically was Neo was symbolically doing by breaking free from the system.
Okay.
Then you'll have distractions from this world, such as pleasure, women, money, drugs, that will come after you because they know you establish that connection with God, and you can, I guess, call them agents. So they're going to come and try to sever your link, and they're going to try to find your weak spot that, oh, he used to like drugs, he used to like sex, or he used to go to the club and chase women. So all of these elements from your past will start popping up. And that's what the lady in red symbolizes, is temptation and pleasure. Is when you're on the right path, anything can pop up in the form of an agent. And even some handlers can pop up in your life in the guise of girlfriends or friends and women who are there to basically assigned by the system to come and make you fall astray.
Exactly. And the thing is, a lot of these religious extremists, there's a certain mentality that would look at this and say, sex is bad, or beautiful things are bad, whereas it's not so much that lady in red is bad. There's nothing wrong with that. The only thing is the agent is simply using, or that lady in red is simply being used because that is what works. The matrix is not, let's say it's not an emotional being. It's just calculating, this is what's going to work. This is the weakness. It could have been a man in blue, for example. If that works, that's what would have been used. That is to say, there's nothing wrong or impure or bad about that lady in red. There's nothing whatsoever. She's a beautiful lady, no problem. But it's just being used because that works. Neo was clearly weak to that, and the machine, the matrix, it just does calculations. Okay, this is what will work in this situation, and so on. So the lady in red I think she just represents, that temptation. It could have been anything. It could have been a car. It could have been a man. It could have been anything, but
you also notice, Brother Alexander, is that every time you watched anything from Hollywood or any music industry events, any concerts, they're always going to have some kind of a woman dressed in red to symbolize that temptation and the aspect of worldly and earthly pleasures. There's a and I'll explain the good side of this too.
Please do. Yeah.
And then there's also a video game that I played recently called Death Stranding.
Okay.
In the game, one of the main antagonists of the game is a woman named Amelie.
Okay.
And all of these men are just like so hopelessly in love with Amelie that they're ready to do anything and whatever they're capable of doing, they're gonna do it just to make her happy. And she represents an extinction entity, one of destruction, and she's also described as a lady in red. And they're like hopelessly in love with her, which many people in Hollywood describe as like when they give up their soul for fame and fortune. That's what appears to them, I guess, in the form of a malevolent entity that they sell out to. Some people call it the devil, and it appears to them as a lady in red to symbolize this temptation and this woman that's like hotter than hell. They're ready to just give up everything and anything just to make her happy. So that's basically that temptation of this world that Neo was basically falling astray to, not knowing that if he would have sold out, the next moment there was a gun pointing to him.
Exactly.
So that's the reality. But the positive side of the lady in red is the story of Mary Magdalene, Saint Mary Magdalene. And Mary Magdalene was a promiscuous woman. She was a prostitute, but it's the example of God, that God turns saints into sinners, and
Mm-hmm.
sinners into saints.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And someone who basically was who she was, but then she became a godly woman,
Mm-hmm.
and she wore the color red, and that's what she symbolized. So you have the aspect of people saying that in Sufism that Allah is the only reality, everything is an illusion, and that all is one. So then what is that concept of God and the devil? So then we
Mm-hmm.
have that question of the woman in red who could appear as the devil, or
Mm-hmm.
the woman in red, Mary Magdalene, who could appear as a saint. So
Mm-hmm.
everything is about perception and which side of the equation that you're equating to. You have the Moors, the Muslim Moors, who wear the red fez and wear the color red to symbolize many of the aspects of the divine feminine on their head.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends all about perception. And just
Mm-hmm.
like anything in your life that's given to you, you could use it for good or bad. If I have
Mm-hmm.
the internet, I could use it for good means, or to educate myself and spread awareness, or I could use it for bad means.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with anything else. It's whatever God has given you in this life,
Mm-hmm.
everything is predetermined, but you also have the free will that
Mm-hmm.
God has given you on which side of the equation that you will follow. Both are the same color, but both represents different things. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like you have the pill. One color is blue, one color is red, but they're both
Yes,
pills.
true,
So
true.
you have to choose with your own free will on which side you wish to carry forward in that decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and this whole thing was a training program. It wasn't even in the Matrix, so it was actually just to
Yeah.
train. I remember that. I can't remember the guy's name, but he basically coded the lady in red. That young guy, the small
Yeah.
guy, code.
Spider. I think his name was Max or Spider.
I think so. Yeah, I can't remember, but yeah, he. I mean, he code. It was as a test, to teach Neo something at that point. Because
Yeah.
and it's like this in real world, in our plane of existence. Again,
Hmm.
the lady in red is just, it's allegorical. It's got nothing to do with being female. It's got nothing to do, with
Of
looking a
course.
certain way. It's just, it represents temptation, and you need to have that awareness, which obviously Neo didn't have. You need to have that awareness that, look, this is what's going on. You don't need to, you're going to have certain feelings. You don't need to resist that, but you need to know you need to have awareness what's going on. Otherwise, the next time you turn around, you might have a gun to your face. Um, and I think
Yeah, yeah.
that's the same in this kind of life. I mean,
You have the aspects of Babylon, or what they call the Scarlet Woman.
yeah, that's what I've read. Actually, that's a great point, because I've read that, that's what she represents. This lady in red represents the. I don't actually. Can you explain what that is? The Scarlet Woman of Babylon.
So that basically, it's not talking about females as a whole, but it's
Yeah.
basically an allegorical
Mm-hmm.
representation
Sure.
of those that are fighting to protect the system, and
Mm-hmm.
those who benefit from the pleasures and I guess the itineraries of the system where it
Uh-huh.
pleases them. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what the allegorical meaning of the Scarlet Woman or the
Mm-hmm.
Lady in Red symbolizes.
Yeah.
That it's those people that are willing to sell out anyone and anything just to make sure that they have all the
Mm-hmm.
pleasures of this world.
The Scarlet Woman of Babylon. It's
Yeah,
funny because, again, with the Matrix, the Wachowskis, there's, in my opinion, very little of it is by chance. I mean, the name of the ship, for example, what's the name of the ship that Morpheus pilots?
Nebuchadnezzar.
He Nebuchadnezzar was a Babylonian king. That's who he was.
Yeah,
So it's just, I mean, people say that this red woman in red represents this Scarlet
yeah,
Woman of Babylon, and I think that's not by chance, if you know what I mean.
yeah, definitely. And look where they are. They're in Zion. So
There
that's
is
another.
Zion. Yep, exactly. Yeah.
They're basically in the Holy Land. You have
Mm-hmm.
Nebuchadnezzar, then you have Lady in Red,
Mm-hmm.
then you have the love between Neo and Trinity, the
Uh-huh.
two souls becoming one.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so much teachings that they're giving you that you are going to be faced with the aspect of good and evil in this life. And anything that you do, you could either use it for good or for evil. But with
Mm-hmm.
the time that you've been given here, what are you willing to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
That's basically telling you that things are predetermined for you in a way,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also the aspect of your choice, which
Mm-hmm.
the Oracle tells Neo that you already know what you're going to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
basically you have to act upon it. And what we see with many people who come to you for advice and they want consolation and someone to hear them out, but ultimately they're going to do what feels right to them. Right?
Yeah, yeah, very true, very true. What?
So you have the aspect of red, my brother, which is one which is temptations of the system,
Yeah,
and one is Mary Magdalene, someone who turned a sinner into a saint and a woman of God.
yeah.
So you have both aspects that one can analyze and follow through.
I guess since we've covered that as well, is there anything else that strikes your mind from the Matrix, the first Matrix movie?
It just basically shows you that how was Neo able to become the one at the end when the woman that he loved and she loved him, eventually she surrendered because she kept resisting her love for him. She kept resisting, but when something happened to him, that's when that act of pure love happened between her and Neo, and that's when he was able to become the one. That when both become one, that's the true reality of God. Is
Yeah.
when you master the divine feminine and divine masculine energies within you and with your partner, that's when you become a complete being.
And the
So
funny thing is about
that's it.
Neo. Neo is Neo. Obviously, Neo means new, but Neo is also an anagram for one. You know, it's an anagram for one. Um, and there is another instance where the Wachowskis have used anagrams. You know, so it's I don't think that's a mistake as well. You know.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, look at their own personal transformation, without getting into it.
yes, yes,
A
yes.
lot of the people in Hollywood, they try
Yeah.
to represent that oneness of man and woman, whether in their appearance or in other ways that they try to portray. But, to each its own. I don't, mind anybody living their life
Yeah.
the way that they makes
Yeah, I
them happy.
mean, I agree with you. I mean, there's just, it's what we're talking about. If we can't get into this identity politics situation because that's
Yeah,
just it's leading to suffering.
yeah, yeah.
um, if you're a man and you're going to make that part of your identity and hate women, or if you're a woman and you're going to make that part of your identity and hate men, both of those people are the same side of they're both aspects of the same, coin. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But that's the shaitan, my brother. Like you have the
Yeah.
aspect of ego. It's a three-letter word,
Mhm.
but it has the power to destroy relationships, put
Exactly. I mean, you know, ego is exactly what we're talking about, in terms of identification. So we talked about identification. You know what? This episode's going on long, and that's good, mate. Let's just get it all out there, mate. Let's just get it
oh,
all out
let's
there.
let's do it. I got the energy to do it.
Me too. Me too. You got me fair. You got me. You got. You're. I'm feeling the energy from you, mate. But what was I just saying? What were we talking about?
Yeah, we were just talking about the aspect of
Oh,
ego and
ego. Yeah.
how,
See
yeah,
the identification. See that virtual self-image or that avatar that you identify within the matrix. That's similar to what the ego is to us. I mean, the ego is simply it's a function of your brain. I mean, your brain has to have ego. It has to have this sense of I, because if you don't have that, you're just, that'll be dangerous for you. For example, you're just not going to, if you don't have this sense of I, you're not going to care if a lion's coming up and going to attack you or eat you, because you don't have this sense of I. So the ego serves a function, in the brain. It's a brain function, the ego. And I'm talking about ego in the psychological sense, not ego as in, what modern day gurus are talking about ego. I'm talking about proper ego, psychological function of the brain for
yeah,
a survival purpose. And the ego serves a function. We have to have it because you have to have the sense of I to survive. If you don't
hmm
have the sense of I, you're not going to care what happens to you. Survival requires that you have a sense of me or I. But I think the problem occurs when you fully identify with that ego. It's as if you're identifying with your avatar in the matrix. So I didn't want to use the word ego because I think it sounds like you're talking. But yeah, basically, you know, in my opinion, the ego is very similar to the virtual image that you are. your virtual image in the matrix. It's the same as the ego. If you
Yeah.
identify with your ego, not much good is going to come from that. You just need to know. It's like when blue pills, when red pills are in the matrix, they
Mm-hmm.
know, okay, this isn't actually me. This is an image. This is an avatar,
Yeah.
and just knowing is enough to save you from a lot of pain. Whereas, you know, um, if you don't know and you're fully identified with this ego or this virtual image, like Morpheus said earlier, like you alluded to, you're going to fight people to protect your ego, which isn't
Oh,
really you.
definitely. And, to add on to what you're saying,
Mhm.
we see that, my brother. It's not an American issue or any
It's a
other country.
human issue. It's a
It's a
human
human
issue.
issue.
Yeah.
I go to Pakistan, people have the same mindset
Mm-hmm.
about materialism, how to get ahead of the other person, how to put the other
Mm-hmm.
person down, how to have fames and riches and businesses and cars and women,
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff, not knowing that your own religion is telling you, and if you read it,
Mm-hmm.
that the whole thing is an illusion. And you see the aspect of just making sure that you see what is right, what is wrong, and try to live a good, noble life. And that's basically the reality that even with Neo,
Uh-huh.
he stood up for what was right. What was his main goal? Self-sacrifice at the end to save everyone else. And look,
Mm-hmm.
we have the Matrix 4 coming out. So do we really die, or are we a continuous use of this infinite energy of Almighty God,
Mm-hmm.
that we're always going to be where we're meant to be, doing the things that we're meant to do, people
Mm-hmm.
that we're meant to see?
It's a
So
good
why
question.
worry about
Mm-hmm.
this life, that, or
Mm-hmm.
how I'm going to eat, where I'm going to stay?
Mm-hmm.
Somehow, some way, that the divine, if your heart is right,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna make things happen for you. And I've
Mm-hmm.
been in situations where I lost everything and I got everything back times
Mm-hmm.
10 because I always stood up for what was right. These people, they fall in temptation to the aspect of the lady in red, which is the system, and they fight to protect it.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll do anything and everything to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that they don't inflict nothing upon themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
they might throw the other person down a well just to save their own self. And at the
Mm-hmm.
end, those people suffer too. So
Mm-hmm.
this life is a school. This is a test that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
it, basically what that is teaching you. And also to tell you that when you walk that path, like Neo was doing with Morpheus,
Mm-hmm.
that elements of your past, your weaknesses, will
Mm-hmm.
be exploited by the forces of darkness to try to get
Mm-hmm.
you back into that hole.
Exactly. And the thing is, I think, good and evil, that's definitely a thing, and it serves a purpose. But I think there is, at least in terms of the Matrix, there's something a bit deeper than that, to have this duality of good and evil. Because if you go back to the woman in red, there is a type of mentality that looks at in real life, that looks at a woman like that and thinks,
Yeah,
that's a bad woman, blah blah blah. That's, and thinks, this is a bad woman, something evil about
yeah.
this woman. Whereas I think you can look beyond good and evil in this case. It's just the Matrix is making a calculation. It needs to stay in control. The Matrix needs to stay in control, and it is determined,
Hmm.
okay, for this person, this is specifically going to serve that function. This is going to keep that person in our control so we can continue on with our status quo. What do you
Absolutely
think,
right.
since we're going on a streak here, tell me about who is the Oracle? What do you think about the Oracle? Because we know, and we might be crossing into the Matrix 2, Matrix 3, I don't know. But, I think at one point the Oracle was wrong. Is that correct? I think she told Neo something about, do you remember the Oracle was wrong about something?
Oh, it was in the beginning when she told him that he wasn't the one.
Yes, yes. Okay, so let's talk about the Oracle then. What do you think of the Oracle?
So the Oracle is basically a motherly figure,
Uh-huh,
like the aspect of the divine feminine. That's
uh-huh,
basically there to reinforce the decisions that you already are going to make.
mm-hmm,
So every time Nia would go to her, she would
mm-hmm,
just say, "Know thyself."
mm-hmm,
And Sufism, they tell you to know thyself is to know thy Lord, to know thy Lord is to know thyself. So basically, she was just there as a motherly figure to reinforce
mm-hmm,
his decision making power, such as in the first one, she tells him, "Sorry, kid, you have the
mm-hmm,
gift, but you just haven't realized it because
Mm-hmm.
that resistance was still there between him and Trinity, where they had
Mm-hmm.
not expressed their love for each other.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that they had to do on their own. He only became the one once the aspect of love was there. So same thing in the second one. She said, "Are you going to choose whether Trinity lives or dies?"
Mm-hmm.
And the inevitable reality was that she was going to die. And it
Yeah.
happened in the third one. First one, she said, "It's between you and Morpheus. One of you
Mm-hmm.
is going to die, and you have to choose."
And she was wrong about that, clearly. And when I think about the Oracle, I think about in our plane of existence when you have all these so-called psychics who will charge you for money and tell you a load of, they might get one out of 100 things right.
Yeah,
Inevitably, it's like if you throw 100 darts at a dartboard, one is going to hit the bullseye eventually.
yeah,
And it's funny because there's, in the Matrix, it's like as if there's a bigger force at play, whereas Neo is hearing from her, even though she was wrong, Neo is hearing from her what he needed to hear to continue his career, you
of
know?
course, of course.
And I think it could be in the second movie, Morpheus, something goes wrong. I think they're going to see the Merovingian and they don't, something goes wrong. And Morpheus says, something like, no, what happened and couldn't have happened any other way. And then it goes right for them at that point.
Of course.
So I think, bad things, or even if you hear a lie like from the Oracle or something that's incorrect, I think if you're in the right mindset, whatever happens, good or bad, it's what you need at that time to achieve the objective that is best for you. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Yeah, definitely. Because you remember when Neo came out of the room and Morpheus
Uh-huh.
was outside waiting for him in the first movie.
Uh-huh.
He told Neo that what was said was for you and for you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So you have the aspect of, many female mystics
Mm-hmm.
that are there to guide their communities. And then you have,
Mm-hmm.
because she represents light, and then you have darkness, which is the other side. So it's basically an internal struggle going
Mm-hmm.
on between all walks of life, all
Mm-hmm.
groups, all places, settings, and venues you can imagine. There's always that balance and
Mm-hmm.
struggle between light and dark, good and bad, those kind of things. So
Mm-hmm.
as long as you stand up for what is right, no matter who or what force stands against you,
Mm-hmm.
you are going to win with the power of faith,
Mm-hmm.
with the power of love, and by the power of doing what's right. So why worry about the system and its luxuries and all the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that you're fighting to protect? If you do what is right, it tells you in a lot of these religions anyway that this
Mm-hmm.
life is illusion. And if
Mm-hmm.
you pass the test, then the eternal life after this will be your reward. And we will
Mm-hmm.
see in the fourth Matrix movie what allegorical reward Neo will
Mm-hmm.
get for his sacrifice.
Because in the end of Matrix Revolutions, which was the last one, he
Yeah.
essentially he sacrificed himself, and you could see sort of the machines taking him in, sort of reabsorbing his code back into the Matrix.
Yeah, exactly. So why do people worry about this life? It's what
Mhm.
I tell my friend, that I'm always going to exist in some way, shape, or form. Why do I
Exactly. Yeah.
worry that,
Yeah.
oh, I only have this one life and
Mm,
oh, this is going to happen, that's going to
mm,
happen.
mm,
You heard that theory from Rumi, right? From Sufism, that
mm,
I was once a mineral, then
mm,
I was a plant, then I
mm,
became an animal, then I was a man, then man goes to angel, and then angel goes back to God. And in Islam, when someone dies, we
mm.
say to Allah we belong, and to Him we shall return. And because that oneness
Uh-huh.
is the only reality, and that's it.
Mm,
Allahat, one of the 99 names,
mhm,
that everything is one
mm,
internal, continuous energy, and
mm,
somehow, some way, you will continue to exist, even with
mm,
Neo,
mm,
with his supposed death. You
mm,
see that ball of energy that's depicted after his death, and
mhm,
his purpose continues to carry on in other ways.
mhm. I mean, if you look at it like a computer game, right, a video game, right? Everything right now, all the games are pretty much on the cloud. But in our time, you had cartridges, you had CDs, and so
Sure.
on. And every single video game character is encoded in that cartridge or CD. So
Hmm.
even if you play the game and your character dies, or if you just turn off the computer game,
Yeah.
That character still 100% exists in that CD.
Yep.
And even if you destroy the CD, the information or the code that codes for that character, that exists, whether as information, whether it's in someone's brain, or it's the same thing whether that information exists in a brain or on a CD. They're just two different mediums. So if you consider everything as information, it persists. I don't know if information can
Yeah.
be deleted, but I mean, if you look at the Matrix, I mean, when they're actually on the ship, they're just looking at numbers, and they're interpreting. Do you know what I mean? They're looking at a computer screen of numbers, and they're able to interpret that. It's all
Yeah.
information.
And
Everything is just information.
that relates to what, to add on to what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
with the occult art of gematria, which is a part of Kabbalah, which tells you that God, when he created the world, he associated with the letters and the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And every event, anything, incident that happens in humanity, the world, there's always some kind of an occult numerology associated with it. What the Matrix is teaching you is about the art of gematria,
Mm-hmm.
and how many of the people in charge of many things use this art as a form of divination and probability and statistics and concluding realities. And it's funny, my brother, that when you use gematria, I put my full name into the gematria calculator.
What's
And a lot of
gematria exactly? I mean, I know Kabbalah is like
yeah.
part of Judaic mysticism, but what's gematria?
So gematria is a form of Kabbalah as well, and it tells you that when God created the world, he associated the letters and the numbers together. So everything has a numerical value associated to it, which is the matrix with the numbers running down the screen. So your life has kind of been predetermined in a way. It's like when I put my full name into the gematria calculator, and my numerical value comes up to a certain simplification.
Okay, like a single number, or
it's a single number, but it'll have like different ciphers associated to it. So when I look at the numbers the other words that match the numerical value of my name, I'll have all of this Masonic stuff, Sufi stuff, like places I've lived, places that I went to. And I'm surprised that when I was given that name, basically my whole reality was programmed right in front of me with all these things that I was going to do.
Very interesting indeed.
Yeah.
Very interesting. What else can we talk about? Okay, since we're on the subject of Judaism, what does Zion represent in the Matrix?
Zion represents the salvation for the people, or the Holy Land. That's basically what it is. It's basically the place where, I guess you could say, that the people of God are. So that's exactly what it is. It's basically I guess, where a lot of the stuff that has taken place in religious history, and they're saying that, it's just like what we see in the Matrix world, that everyone is fighting to be in control of Zion. They have a council, and councils disagreeing with each other. Then they have all these different issues on who's in charge and who doesn't want to be in charge. But we see that exemplified in today's world as well, about you have the aspect of these places, powerful places. We don't know what we only are shown the surface reality, but there's a reason why they're in continuous war and suffering that we don't know, and maybe the average person might not be able to handle the truth.
No, perfect. Yeah. Zion's a perfect name for the city. Actually, I'm just reading this. I think this is from the Psalms. I'm just going to read it out to you because we're talking about Babylon. Sure. It says, "By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion." What a quote, So it seems like the two are related, Zion and Babylon. But I think Zion, I look at it, Zion's it's a beautiful name it's a beautifully chosen name for their city, I think, sort of like a chosen land or promised land. But I think Zion is more of it's nothing to do with land. Land's just territory. It's more of like a state.
It's like a state of being of you connecting with God.
Exactly. It's like a collection. It's like a concentration of people of a certain mindset. I think, which is what we see there. What else can we talk about?
Whatever you like, my brother.
Do you have any specific things, any other specific scenes from the Matrix that stick out?
Um, I guess the aspect of good always winning over evil always stands out. That
Mm-hmm.
even if all the odds are against you,
Mm-hmm.
like we see in the third Matrix movie, where
Mm-hmm.
every single being in the Matrix was turned into an agent, and
Yeah, what about that? I mean, that's you brought up a good point because that's and I've thought of this. I don't know what to make of it, but you see Agent Smith basically turning. It looks like he's trying to turn everyone into himself. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So he's converted all these people into basically replicas of himself.
yeah, that's right. And it shows you that there was only that one power of goodness
Mm-hmm.
that no matter how much evil tried to put pressure on it, evil knew its fate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when Neo got up, he said, "Get away from me."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, that it's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
And when he made Neo into himself,
Uh-huh.
that's when the singularity happened because Neo,
Exactly. So that's the, and I still don't understand this fully, but Neo defeat. Now, is that how Neo defeated Smith by letting, by this kind of fusion, by letting him
yeah, 'cause
absorb?
you got to realize
Uh-huh.
who was the Smith that fought Neo? It was the Oracle, the one that was converted into a Smith.
Mm-hmm.
It was her. That it was that Smith that fought Neo, and
Right, 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 right.
he was plugged into the main Zion, the Holy of Holies.
Mm-hmm.
He was so the one with the love of Trinity, him being infused with the evil, the dark aspect, plus with the motherly aspect that
Mm-hmm.
did that, and boom, that singularity happened, and that's when evil got destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Neo know what he was doing, and
Mm-hmm.
that's when the Oracle spoke through Smith that everything that has a beginning has an
Mm-hmm.
end,
Mm-hmm.
and Smith kind of had a some kind of a brain issue. He said, "What did I just say? Because those are not my words."
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Neo knew that that was the Oracle, and just to let Smith take him over and let the singularity happen, so they could
Mm-hmm.
all be destroyed.
Wow, that's amazing. And like I said, I still don't understand that particular aspect of it. But even in the first film, right, the first Matrix, how is it in the first movie? How is it that Neo eventually defeated Smith? I'm asking you.
That was through the power of love,
No, I
because
mean, what did Neo actually do to defeat Smith physically?
he went inside of him. Because
Exactly. He went inside of him. I think there's something, there's something there. The singularity you're speaking of. There's something to that. I just haven't figured it out completely. But in the first one, basically, he destroys Smith by jumping into him. And what you're saying in the third one, that singularity happens where he allows Smith you know, to absorb him, right?
yeah, that's right. Because
Mm-hmm.
Neo knew that that was the Oracle Smith, that was the Oracle that had
Mm-hmm.
became Smith. So that was the motherly aspect, the aspect of love of him and Trinity that he carried on top of being connected to the main Zion head mainframe, which he had a long and traverse like journey to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So the aspect is that you have the aspect of light and dark. You cannot defeat the darkness within yourself unless you infuse it with the light. So that's what that is teaching you in a spiritual way, that your negative traits, your dark aspects, and your light aspects, because not every person is gonna be like a perfect being. Everyone's gonna have some vices about them. But if you manage that and you basically balance that within yourself, because Neo cannot exist without Smith, Smith cannot exist without him. You have good and evil. God has let evil loose and good loose.
Mm-hmm.
So one, if let's say only good existed, then good will lose its purpose.
If you don't have evil, then good, there's literally no meaning. I mean, they define each other. Good fully defines evil, and evil fully defines good. One
Yeah.
without the other makes no sense.
So you have good days, you have bad days. I
Uh-huh.
mean, it's like in your life. If every day was a good day and you didn't have any challenges,
Uh-huh.
would you be the person who you are today without any growth, without any lessons?
Exactly. And we see that I mean, if you just look at Neo's career, the trauma that he had to go through from Matrix, I mean, from Matrix 1, where he essentially, did he die in Matrix 1?
Yeah, he did. So
Yes, and then Trinity kisses him and he wakes up. Yeah. So I mean, Neo's gone through all this trauma essentially, and
yeah,
that's been part of his growth to the one, becoming the one. And it's funny in the Matrix, there were more there were more than one ones. There were more than one Neos according to the architect. Isn't that correct?
yeah, that's Neo was the seventh one. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, you have the aspect of the holy number of seven, which in Islam is seen as something.
Was there seven? Was he the seventh?
He was the seventh. So you
Oh,
have the aspect of the seven realms, the seven
mm-hmm.
heavens,
Yeah.
the seven I guess different beings that existed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically a continuous perfection
Mm-hmm.
of one continuation after the other.
He Let me just get the quote up. Yep, continue. I'm just going to try to find the quote. Just continue what you were saying.
Yeah, so the number seven is associated with God.
Uh,
So even if you look at the letter G, which is God, that's the seventh letter.
yeah.
So so basically that's what it is. You have to see where it is, what it stands
Mm-hmm.
for, and it's basically telling you the aspect of good winning over evil, where
Mm-hmm.
you have Smith and this entire Matrix metropolis against this one man who's from this living in some underground place, hiding from everything, and he was able to defeat him at the end, no matter what happened or how it happened. Good is always destined to win, and the aspect of balancing the light and darkness within yourself in this short life that we're in, basically in this spiritual school.
Found a quote here. Now, this is when the architect is speaking to Neo,
Yeah.
and the architect says to Neo, "Your life is the sum of a remainder of an unbalanced equation inherent to the programming of the Matrix."
Mhm.
Now, what I take from that is he's almost inevitable to happen, from this code. It's
Yeah.
like, part of this code, you will get this, let's call it what's a disruption,
Mhm.
and from what the architect's saying, it seems that Neo is this kind of disruption, and there were other, and I'm just using my own terminology, there were other disruptions before him. The architect saying that he's the sum of a remainder of an unbalanced equation and all that. But essentially, Neo is this kind of odd, peculiar aspect of this whole equation, this big equation. And there were others before him and so on. And that kind of, if you look at sort of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, is that what these prophets were of old, or are they just
Yeah,
are
definitely.
they some kind of, if you get a billion people, just by probability, a couple of them are going to be highly connected, if you know
Yes.
what I mean, to a different plane. I mean, it's the same as if you take a billion people, billion children, right? And they've never played a certain sport, whatever sport, right?
Hmm.
Never played it. You get a billion people, you are going to get, by just sheer probability, you will eventually get a child who, without ever having played that sport, is an absolute expert at it. So
Yes.
you're going to get that glitch, and sometimes I think, is that what the prophets were, King Solomon, David, were they these sort of glitches in this whole story, that there just has to be, if you take a certain amount of people, there has to be someone who is going to be connected, let's say, for lack of a better term, and maybe sort of in the way Neo is, that there has to be a one, just the it's an as the architect says, inherent to the programming of the Matrix. So inherent to our human story, maybe there just has to be these kind of glitches once every so often, and maybe that's who our prophets were, whether it's David or Solomon or Moses or Jesus or Muhammad. I don't know, I'm just
Yeah, yeah,
guessing here.
definitely, definitely. I mean, to add on to what you're saying is Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, Solomon, peace be upon them all. They were all correct
Mm-hmm.
in their own ways.
because I think there's two ways to look at it, and this is just speculation. We're just speculating.
Mhm.
But you wonder because I think if you look at traditional religious thinking, right?
Yeah.
It's as if God suddenly decided to intervene and send a prophet.
Yeah.
That's one way of looking at it. But the other way of looking at it is that, and we're looking at what the architect said to Neo, maybe inherent in the human species, maybe inherent in this entire story, for
Yes.
prophets to rise. Maybe that's an inevitable part of the story. That's just how the coding works. Inevitably there will come, these who we call prophets,
Yes.
and maybe both are true. I don't know, but when I look at the Matrix, I sometimes see it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is that,
Mm-hmm.
in order to continue with that, is that
Mm-hmm.
there's always going to be some kind of a teacher that's going to be walking this earth, or
Mm-hmm.
avatar that's going to be existing to reinforce the message of the previous prophets. So what Surah Baqarah said, Neo was already doing that by
Mm-hmm.
reinforcing the
Mm-hmm.
effort and the will of the ones before him. So, and that there always going to be some kind of a teacher walking on this earth, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what era that you exist in,
Mm-hmm.
means that there's always going to be an anomaly
Mm-hmm.
of God that's going
An
to be walking.
anomaly, that's the word I was looking for. Anomaly. That is the exact word I was looking for, Sal, my genius friend. These anomalies, like I said, with the example of if you get a billion children, you're going to get anomalies who are, without having practiced the sport, are
Hmm.
going to be complete experts. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
And if you consider, I mean, what is truth? I mean, truth, it's a difficult question. But I mean, let's say there's this beyond the physical, our physical perceptions. Let's say we're surrounded by information, and we're just surrounded by information.
Yes.
Um, and let's say inherent in the physical brain, in the actual biological brain, there is some sort of function or sensory ability that can tap into that. Like, you're going to get anomalies
Yes.
that are very connected to that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're connecting to the same. It's not like there's different sources of information. There's one truth. There's one well of information, and
Yeah.
you're going to get these people who connect to that with sort of the portal that's connecting is very clear. You're going to get that. Just like you have people who have different, you can get one person who has an exceptional sense of smell and one
Hmm.
person who can hardly smell. That's just going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, Wait, let me just check. I just want to give you something just to illustrate that, because it's starting to sound a bit esoteric, and I don't mean it in esoteric way.
Well,
But
this was meant to. This was also predetermined that Alexander and Uncle Sal were going in today.
exactly, it's like sharks. They can sense a minute, tiny drop of blood from I don't know how far away, right?
Yeah.
And if you didn't know the science behind that, you would think that that's magic, right? You would think it's magic. So when we're talking about humans having this extrasensory aspect, we're not talking about anything esoteric, or we're just talking about something that we may not understand the science behind. Anything that exists, there will be some sort of science behind it, right?
Yeah.
And we know that. I mean, we know that intelligence agencies. I mean, these people have the wisdom, the money, the resources. They have researched these kind of abilities, so that tells you something. These people have the money. They can do almost. They have the money, limitless resources, access to everything they want, and they are researching these kinds of abilities. So you have to ask, why is that?
Of
You know,
course.
and so sometimes I think these anomalies, prophets, are like anomalies that are, and this word seems to be used quite often in the Matrix, but that are inevitable. inevitably
Yeah.
in the human situation, inevitably you're going to get people with these abilities that we don't yet understand the physics behind. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just the balance of the world. I've been in certain situations in my spiritual journey,
Mm-hmm.
visiting Sufi shrines in Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
And these people just come out of nowhere. They guide you the way that they want to guide you.
Mm-hmm.
And I see them as anomalies because to a normal person, that wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
make, they come and guide you and they're on their way and you don't see
Mm-hmm.
them.
At the same time, at the same time, yeah, exactly.
Truth is stranger than fiction. And
That's true. I mean, even the science of today, like even the science of today, if you had have told the science of today to
yeah,
someone not only 50, not only 100 years ago, but even 50 years ago,
yeah,
you know, they might shut you down, even though it's proven science now. If you brought that to someone 50 years ago, they might shut you down. If you brought it to someone a few hundred years ago, they might have killed you,
oh yeah,
for and that's just how science works. So I think we're straying a bit here, but this kind of dogmatism that you see in religion,
yeah.
you also see that in science, this unwillingness to, do you know what I mean? You see the same dogmatism in science as you do in religion, and they're both aspects of exactly the same coin, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you have the aspect of human nature, my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's in race, religion, science, everybody wants to be right.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. No one's willing to sit down and make peace with one another. Even we see so much death and destruction and suffering, children suffering over the human ego, people who refuse
Mm-hmm.
to say that I'm right, you're wrong. And I've studied all of these different paths. I even made videos about them.
Mm-hmm.
Every path is teaching you the code of conduct on how to be a good human being. It's the
Mm-hmm.
human that sometimes create their own issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the reality. People just have to sit down, be reasonable, be logical, and know that if something is causing suffering to somebody, that's not what God is. God is unity, love, happiness, peace.
And yeah, I mean, just on the subject, I mean, of connectedness in Matrix, in the Matrix, Neo, I think he starts to exhibit this kind of, even when he's not plugged in, he starts to exhibit these strange, odd behaviors, when he's not even plugged in,
Yeah,
you know, um, for example, he gets blinded, right? And then he's
yeah,
still able to see, so there's,
with the
um,
spiritual eye.
exactly. And do you remember he actually stops some of the Sentinels? And this is him outside the Matrix without, this the sort of superhuman abilities the Matrix could grant him. Even
Yeah.
outside the Matrix, he was able to stop the Sentinels. And I can't remember who said it, but it's like the power of the one extends beyond the
Oh
Matrix or
yeah,
something. Yeah.
because you're infusing all realities and all
Mm-hmm.
forms of existence,
Mm-hmm.
including all that you have into this one physical being. That's
Mm-hmm.
when you ultimately get connected to God. And
Mm-hmm.
one who's connected to God, he can do anything. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like some of the Sufi masters and some of the
Mm-hmm.
stories and the miracles that you hear about them. That's basically what Neo is. He's a,
Mm-hmm.
a Sufi master who's infused all of those things and is able to perform all of these miracles.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if the Wachowskis researched Sufism or talked to Sufis. Wouldn't be surprised. Or
Most
like,
of them have,
mm,
even though they might not want to give credit to the East.
uh,
A lot of the organizations that you see in the West, Sufism is their Eastern parent.
mm, indeed. What else can we talk about? Let's just cover everything. You still got energy in you?
Yeah. As I'm here as long as you're here.
What else is there? There's something I was going to talk about. Yeah, there's there's a lot of Easter eggs too. I mean, the things we're talking about, these are, if you look hard enough, you'll find, but there's a lot of Easter eggs too. Like the hotel, the hotel is called, I think it's called, let's see, hotel in Matrix name, heart of the city hotel, and I think I've
Ah,
heard people using, referring to heart as significant, and even his room number is 303.
Mm.
So there's all these little Easter eggs. So there's a lot of little things like that in the Matrix.
Well, those are what we call subliminal messages that
Mm,
the makers of the movie are putting. So subconsciously, your
mhm,
brain picks up on it,
mhm,
and somehow, some way, it's going to be there where you'll be able to relate it to the story of the Matrix
mhm,
and the philosophy or the concept of a holographic universe and those
mhm,
kind of things,
mhm, mhm.
or the
Yeah.
sociology associated with a system like that.
Mhm,
So many things, so many questions, so many answers, so many reflections.
mhm.
And that's why the Matrix is a work of art that you could just
It's a
go on
pure, see,
knowledge.
and I just can't stress this enough. I cannot stress this enough. In the entire Hollywood, I mean, you're going to get films that have one or two things you can pick out. Um, and I feel some films sometimes just put these confusing sort of themes in it just to make it seem more mysterious. So it sort of asks you to think, sort of force you to think, I wonder what the reasoning is behind that. When really there's nothing there, but the Matrix, every time I watch it,
Mm.
there's something very deep about it. And sometimes when I'm thinking of these sort of deep things or these sort of issues, then I'll think of, wait a minute, I saw that in the Matrix. Do you know what I mean? Something like that.
Oh yeah,
So
definitely.
you can watch it as you would watch an action film, science fiction film, and pick
Yeah.
and disregard all the stuff we're talking about, and it's still a great film. When I first watched it, I didn't really pick up any of this stuff. I was, probably in high school.
Hmm.
It was only after that this is, extremely deep and relevant. It's like a really beautifully well done allegory. You know.
Oh yes, definitely. And one thing about the Matrix is that the makers of the Matrix
Mm,
have kind of immortalized that teaching.
mm,
So let's say even 100 years from now, someone can look up the Matrix and watch
mm,
all of its archived footage out there
mm,
and still be able to learn from it. So
mm,
these kind of things, like what we do in our individual efforts, what you're
mm.
doing, Brother Alexander, what I'm doing, all of our videos are out there. So even after our physical life is over, we'll still be making an impact in the life of the seeker who's willing to seek out that information
We
and
hope
will come
so.
across our work.
We really do hope that. I really hope that. That's why we're doing this.
Yeah,
That's why we're doing this. Yeah, it's entertaining too. It's fun. I'm enjoying myself right now talking about this, but
of course.
we're doing this for a reason and talking about these
Definitely.
things for a very specific reason. Yeah, very, very interesting. Just trying to think if there's anything else. Jump in if you remember a particular scene. I think what we'll do is we'll just cover everything in this episode, and then I think we'll probably won't need to do any other episodes.
You have the aspect of the divine feminine and the divine masculine
Yeah, I
that,
mean, how perfect is the relationship between Neo and Trinity? I mean, that's just
oh, it's
it's a
great. I
dream.
would do anything to have a relation like that.
And I hope we both get that. Just speaking about that relationship, and we're just going to talk about it. I just want to talk about relationships for a minute because at the time of recording this podcast, I don't know what the percentage of divorces are, but I know, especially in the West,
It's high.
it's very high. You're it's very high, and you wonder why is that? Because whenever people get married, do they get married thinking, what, I don't know if this is going to work. Let's take a risk, or do they get married thinking that I found the one, this is going to be it. I love
Yeah,
this
see,
person.
what I've seen in the West
Uh-huh.
is mostly people are pressured that they
Mhm.
have to get married or have a degree or have a job or have a place by a certain amount of time.
But even, I mean, that might be the case, but even the marriages where people go in thinking they found the love of their life, even those fail, right?
Yeah, because you have a system that's
Mm,
telling them to just save their own skin. You have a system that's not
exactly.
teaching them
Yeah.
to work with others and
Hmm.
work with people that you love, even when times get rough.
Exactly. And I think especially in
Programming.
marriage relationships, right, which are just in my opinion, in a very bad state right now.
Yeah.
And just Neo and Trinity just represent what the dream, you know. But I think what you said is right. I mean, what you're doing is you're getting two people who have deep down they've got different directions, different wants, and different aims, right?
Yeah.
Now, when things are going well, you could put those two together and things are good. But as soon
Yeah.
as a little bit of stress comes, that forces a little bit of stress comes, and then the individual egos and the individual aims then
Yeah.
manifest, and then you want different things, and then you start fighting each other. Whereas I think what's really cool about this relationship is they both have this objective that's higher than themselves, you
Yes.
know, higher than the
Exactly.
relationship. And once the funny thing is, once you have that, once you have Neo and Trinity, I mean, they have the same objective. You know, they're trying to essentially save people, right? Under Morpheus's leadership. They've got
Yeah.
this overall objective. Once you both have the same objective that is bigger than yourself,
Hmm.
you know, there's not much that can go wrong because you're looking to do the exact same thing. The only thing that can go wrong is maybe you might have a disagreement on how to do that. But even
Sure.
then, you're not going to hate each other because you both know, look, we're both trying to save people here, right? I think this is the best way. You think that's the best way. But look,
Yeah.
we're trying to help people here. And, you know, so it'll be a debate as stuff as opposed to a fight.
Yeah.
You know, and not only that, if you have this goal that is bigger than your own relationship,
Mhm.
it's only at that point when, and it's weird, but but I think it's at that point when the actual interpersonal relationship becomes extremely strong. You know,
Yeah.
you know, and you see that Neo is willing to sacrifice everything for Trinity. You know, you remember when he was meeting the architect,
Hmm.
and the architect gave him a choice, and he chose Trinity.
Hmm.
You know, so you know, I think the solution is, you know, if you have this higher goal, as Neo and Trinity did, you know, then I think that that's a good start for for a relationship between the male and the female. You
Oh
know.
yeah. I mean, you have a society today that's telling women that they don't need a man. Men
Mm-hmm.
are told you don't need a woman.
Mm-hmm.
They're encouraged to be promiscuous and said, "Oh, you're cool if you sleep with this many women."
Mm-hmm.
Women are encouraged the same.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the aspect of the family unit also that's destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Where why were the women given rights in many of these Western countries? Is it because that they care about them? No,
Mm-hmm.
because number one, that breaks up the family unit, and number
Mm-hmm.
two, you're creating more workers and more taxpayers.
Uh-huh.
Ultimately, that benefits the rich when the mother and father are not
Mm-hmm.
home. Then the state comes and raises your kids in their own way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you people need to realize that both need each other. We can't exist without each other, and we need.
You're right, and that's what's missing because you have, I mean, you have on the one hand, you have men who are just abusing women emotionally, physically,
Yeah.
mental, whatever, you know, you have that. And then on the opposite side, you've got this sort of extreme, you know, feminism or militant feminism, whatever you call it. It's, I mean, they're both aspects of, like I keep saying this, but it's such a good example, but, you know, they're both aspects of exactly the same coin. You
You
know,
know, most of those women are traumatized. They put on a masculine front to cover up their traumas and not
I agree.
basically
Yeah.
the divine feminine.
And even the men who abuse women, I mean, all of this is coming out of pain of some sort eventually, you know, deep down,
Yeah.
there's some sort of pain. And I can see, you know, in Morpheus's language, I mean, they're both the enemy. You know, whether you got this the man abusing the woman or the woman abusing the man, and let them. I think the idea is let them do that. You know, let them destroy each other, and then I think let them be two faces of the same coin, and then aside from that, you've got almost like a third path, which is what we see exemplified, just perfectly exemplified in Neo and Trinity. You know, um, that's the way I see it. I mean, I think the time for converting people to a certain ideology is over. You just, you know, let the two aspects of the same coin. Let them just
find each other.
Yeah, who cares? I mean, why let them do that? Because people have tried to have this benevolent attitude and change everyone, convert everyone. That's
Everyone.
And that's there's nothing wrong with that in my opinion. Fair play to the person who does that, but from my personal perspective, just a waste of time. Let them let them do whatever they want, and then you just do what you can with the people who follow the same ideology as you, and don't disturb anyone else. You don't need to. That's sort of the way I see it.
It's funny. Allah says in the Holy Quran that I bring from darkness to light whom I wish.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are those people also it says in the Quran that they will always be blind, deaf,
Mm-hmm.
and dumb,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how much education or light or knowledge you try to put in front of them.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's the truth. In addition to what you're saying, I made a video a month ago
saying that
why 85%. It was called "Why the 85% of the world's population will perish when the time comes," and the 15% that survive.
You cut off there. What was this about the 85%? Say that again.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, it just sort of cut off there. But what did you say? I just want, because it sounded really interesting. What did you say about the 85%?
Yeah, so the 85% are those that are upholding the system, and they're going to perish when the time comes.
Mm-hmm.
And the 15% that make it of the world's beings, there will be the ones of a light, pure love, and they're gonna rebuild the system based off of greed and control and subserviency.
Wait, hold on. You're breaking up.
That's slightly. The reality.
Just give me 1 minute. I think you're just breaking up slightly. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, because I think that happens in the Matrix, right? Where the architect says, okay, you can pick, I don't know how many people, how many people does he ask to pick?
I think 3 males and 6 females. I mean, look, even in the Matrix, that's exemplified. 85% are plugged in, and the 15% are in Zion.
Yeah, it says here. Look, it says here. Basically, 23 individuals to rebuild Zion. 23. There's 20. It's amazing because I just realized this, but 23. I mean, that's how many chromosomes we have as humans. 23 pairs of chromosomes. I don't know if they meant that, but I mean, knowing the Wachowskis, just from their track record, they picked 23 for a reason. What I don't know what that reason was, but the only thing I can see from 23 is we've got 20. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. But 23 people, and I don't know if it's 85% but I think it
was at age 23 when I had started following a lot of my initiatic journeys.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. There's something about, I don't buy into numerology 100%, but there's sometimes things happen at certain ages that are just beyond coincidence, just,
of course.
Like maybe for you it's 23, for me it's probably 33. I'm 33 now. Okay. And you sometimes see these things happening, and it's just when it happens once, when something happens once, okay, it could be coincidence. Twice, okay, but when things are starting to triangulate, then you have to at least consider, maybe there's something bigger going on,
Yeah, that's right. Well, my brother, I think we should call this a session because I think my internet is having some issues.
Good, yeah, no problem. I think we covered everything here. I think we really covered everything here. So, it was good. It was definitely good having this conversation with you, Sal.
And, it was an honor and a privilege. I'm always happy to speak with you, my brother.
Likewise. So for whoever's still tuning in after this long while, I hope you enjoyed that and hope you took something from that. that's our intent, to do these to get across the lesson. And I think we're both still learning how to articulate, but I think hopefully you got something from that. Is there anything you want to say, Salman, before we?
I would just say what Neo tells you in the Matrix and what
Mm,
Brother Alexander tells you. Always follow your own heart, know the
mm,
truth. Wherever you find light, accept it without prejudice.
mm.
Love and respect everyone, and always let your heart be your guiding key.
Well, very well said. Very beautiful. Very beautiful. So, yep, wherever and whenever you're tuning in from, hope you have a great rest of your night. And scene. Very good. That was good, Salman. That was very good.